Chris Duarte gets very unfortunately injured against the Miami Heat, expected to miss multiple weeks. Who needs to step up? What's the fallout from that? We'll break down all that. Plus, Pacers get their most impressive win of the season to me on Friday against the Miami Heat. Well, Andrew Nembhard, of all people, shines with a unique stat line. We'll get to all that today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers as always. My name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, very busy show, jam-packed weekend in Pacerland. First and foremost, Pacers beat the Heat. Very impressive win. We'll talk about that in the second segment, what they did well, why I think it's the Pacers' most impressive game by quite a bit this season. And Andrew Nembhard really shined in that game. We'll close the show talking about him, his impressive game, and one of the best single-digit in three different stats performances I've seen in a while. But we have to lead with the bad news, unfortunately, because it's the long-impact, big news that happened to the Pacers this weekend. Chris Duarte, terrible injury he suffered against Miami on Friday. A grade 2 ankle sprain. Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN reports for Chris Duarte. Just terrible timing for the Pacers, right? Entering year 2, he's talked about this, and Halliburton has talked about this a little bit. Year 2 can be a little tricky. Like, you expect to just come in and get it because you've had a year under your belt, but it takes you a minute to be like, okay, I can't think like that. I have to really focus. And Duarte was just starting to get that, right? So he, had a really great game on Monday, really good last 5 games, and then comes into Friday's game against Miami and just terribly lands on Kyle Lowry defending a layup, twists his ankle so bad, immediately agonizing in pain on the court, couldn't put any weight on it. A lot of people have asked me, actually, why the training staff didn't rush out to him on the floor. And if you watch the replay, actually, I think I have some insight on this. Tyrese Halliburton is actually telling people on the bench, like, no need to come out here. No need to come out on the floor. So I think Halliburton saw what was happening, and maybe Duarte said he doesn't need help or anything and said, no, we don't need it. Although in retrospect, maybe they did because it was really bad. He needed help getting carried off the floor. Terrible timing. Rick Carlisle told us on practice on Sunday, he's out for sure for 2 weeks, which would take us to November 20th from the time he said that, November 18th from the time of the injury Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN reported 4 to 6 weeks, right? So if it's 2 weeks and then he can come back, right? Carlisle said looking at another update in 2 weeks. That's November 20th. That would be 6-game absence. That's a 6-game absence. That's manageable. Still unfortunate, but manageable. A 6-week absence, the absolute maximum that Wojnarowski reported, is 21 games through December 16th. And that's from the injury, not from Carlisle's update on Sunday. So it could even be, plus or minus a game or two there. That's a quarter of the season, right? So we're talking about a substantial amount of time on the table here for this recovery. Now, he was, Scott Agnes took a picture of him if you want to see it in his article in Fieldhouse Files. He was briefly visible at practice. Carlisle says he has no limp. He's already been getting work in with the training staff, so perhaps it's on the front end of that timing. But I'm not a doctor. I don't know. I'm just reporting what other people say. So it sounds like no Carlisle for a while. If you want to just do like a middle of what everybody has said estimation, I would say early December maybe, but they have that long road trip in the process there, so that could cloud the timing of how this goes. Very bad injury to me, both because it's a bad injury in terms of how long it is, but because if you look at the Pacers roster, no matter how you personally as a fan gauge success, if you gauge success as, I like when the Pacers win, this is bad. Chris Duarte has been rounding into form. We'll talk about that in a second. And has been really helpful for the team on defense, which we'll also talk about. And if you're a person who says your gauge of success this season is development, you want to see the team get better, you don't care about the record, draft pick, woohoo, that's still bad. He's in his second year. He made an all-rookie team last year, one of the key players of the core, right? One of the 4 guys, I would say, maybe 5, that their injury is bad for both rubrics, both timelines, that just really hurts the Pacers, right? Last 5 games for Chris Duarte, he had been much, much better. I think everybody kind of knew that. But leading up to that game against the Heat, I apparently closed the tab. He was averaging 12.4 points per game, 47.8% from the field, and 40.7% from deep in that 5 games. 3 rebounds per game. Obviously, that 30-point game is in there, which inflates the stats a bit, but he was playing a little better. Like, he played well against Chicago, especially in the first half. Only had one real dud of a game in there. Like, clearly was improving, figuring out how he fit in with this team. And his defense has been excellent for this team kind of all season. They kind of needed him on the wing. With him on the floor, 113 defensive rating, 118 with him out, right? Like, clearly impactful on that end. So not only was he rounding into form, he plays a key position. He's been better recently. Really tough injury for the Pacers. So they'll have to figure out how to get on without him. That 30-point game was tricky. He had 2 assists in like that 4 minutes against the Heat. Just brutal timing for a guy who was important for the Pacers here. And doubly brutal because the next part of the injury segment that you usually do, right? You talk about the injury, you talk about how it happened and the player's importance, then you say, okay, how do they backfill this guy? Who steps up? Well, the obvious answer would be play Aaron Nesmith more, but he also is hurt right now. Carlisle said on Sunday, unlikely he'll play Monday. If you're listening Monday, that means against the Pelicans tonight. Unlikely that Nesmith will play. Perhaps it's possible. He's listed as questionable, but we'll see what actually happens there. With Nesmith out, Duarte's been filling in as the starter. That's obviously now not possible. So I think a couple of guys make some sense there, but Andrew Nembhard's been filling in. He closed against the Heat. Tyrese Halliburton mentioned potential more minutes for O'Shea Brissett and Terry Taylor. Obviously, Mathurin started the second half against Miami, and it seems like a very natural fit. They did a ton of 3-guard groups against Miami. There's so many ways this could go, right? Nembhard has been working, and I think he's a really good perimeter defender, and they've kind of prioritized defense with that spot. But that could be tricky against size. And the same argument, like McConnell has been getting praise. Perhaps he gets a bump here. He doesn't give them size to defend with either. And Hield's been in great form recently, but he can't really defend the wings. Like, it's going to be tricky. Ben Mathurin could start. I think he has the size to play defense pretty well. I think he would probably be the first or second best candidate, depending on how you feel about, if you want Mathurin to still be with the bench and doing well there, maybe Nembhard makes more sense. So maybe O'Shea or Terry Taylor moves down, and then it's a bigger group. I don't know. Because Hallie said them, I wanted to include them. So there's a lot of guys that could be in line to start. I don't want to guess. I think if I had to predict, I would say Benedict Mathurin, just because he started the second half against the Heat. That's not based on any style things, anything someone said. That's just based on the action that they did in the second half of that game. But, obviously with more time to assess, they may decide to do something else. And I don't know what Carlisle's priorities are with the second unit, what's most important for him to have with that bench group. So we'll see who ultimately ends up starting at the 3. Now, a lot of those guys that I just said could be beneficiaries. I mean, Andrew Nembhard's played every game besides opening night this season, but he's probably going to get a bump in minutes, especially after how he played against Miami. But the fact that he's guarding, 2 guards a little bit better means he will probably get more minutes. And they're going with more 4-guard lineups, it seemed like, given what they did against Miami, although that could have just been a Miami thing. But it seems like Andrew Nembhard could be in line for more minutes, and then probably one of Terry Taylor or O'Shea Brissett could get some minutes. O'Shea played pretty well defensively, especially against Miami. His offensive game was especially his shot, but his defense was pretty good to the point that maybe he's the guy that is the beneficiary here. There's a lot of stuff that could slide into place, but they don't have any really forward wingy guys. And if the guard lineups are really struggling or they need to go bigger, they're kind of limited on options, which is why Trevelin Queen, the 2-way player that they signed during training camp, stole him after Philly waived him. First of all, Trevelin Queen, Saturday night, plays for Fort Wayne, the Madness in the G League. 27.7 rebounds, 6 assists. The very next day, he's at Pacers practice. And that could have meant a lot of things. Usually if Fort Wayne's at home and they don't play for a while, they can just send the 2-way guys with the Pacers for practice. But in this case, it's noteworthy for 2 reasons. One, Kendall Brown was not with the Pacers at practice, right? So Queen was individually called up because they wanted him around. But 2, Kendall Brown was not there, right? So they decided they just wanted, or I just said that. But to the injuries mean it's also important, right? Both of him being there, Kendall Brown not being there, right? The injury timing, it all just made me think, maybe he will be a guy that sneaks in like 5-10 minutes a game if they really need depth at that spot. So he's another one. But until Nesmith is back, this is a tricky situation. You've got to figure out how to survive on the wing on a team that already was heavy on guards and centers. And now the 2 guys who you could say they're kind of wings are both injured at the same time. So Pacers have to do something tricky, especially against New Orleans, where it sounds like Nesmith is unlikely to play, to get back on track in this game. I don't know if Nesmith's injury is the same one he had in the other foot earlier in the season. I only have questions about if it is or isn't because Rick Carlisle said, alluded to and asked about the injury earlier, He missed a week and a half the first time. Hopefully that could be the timeline again. And Neesmith played against Washington one Friday ago from listening to this, which would be about a week and a half. So maybe the coming Wednesday against, I can't remember, Denver, he could be back. I don't know. But in the short term, it's going to be tough for the Pacers to figure this out. So the biggest loser here, obviously Duarte. Horrible timing, sad injury. The second biggest loser is the Pacers. A couple young guys, though, could step up and be winners. Now, let's talk about the flip side and the bright side of the Pacers weekend, because the Duarte injury overshadows everything because it will last longer than one game. It's a huge bummer for a player who's been really stepping up recently. But the Pacers got a super impressive win in that game, especially impressive when considering they didn't have Duarte to defend for much of the game. Let's talk Pacers Heat, what went well, how the Pacers got it done, and why, to me, it's their most impressive win of the season by a mile. Let's take one short little break so I could talk to you about PrizePicks. What do you think of the idea of picking Luka Doncic to score more or less than a certain number of points, or Steph to have a certain number of made threes, or Tyrese Halliburton to throw out a certain number of assists? That's what PrizePicks is all about, and I love that format. It's super simple and easy to play, and you don't have to go against other people. It's just you versus whatever projections PrizePicks tells you they have. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they will go more or less than their PrizePicks projection on any number of stats, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus their projections. They've got NBA, NFL, MLB. Well, they had MLB. Now it's over. And a bunch of college sports. College basketball is here. You can do all that and more in 60 seconds or less on PrizePicks. It's that easy. They offer safe and fast withdrawals and are currently operational in over 30 states as well as Canada. Download the PrizePicks app. Go to prizepicks.com. Sign up. Play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive up to $100 match if you use the promo code LOCKEDON when you sign up. Again, $100 you deposit, PrizePicks gives you $100, you deposit $50, they give you $50. You get the idea. Don't forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON when you sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100 at PrizePicks. PrizePicks, daily fantasy made easy. Thank you for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, Locked On Heat is the way to go. Of course, hear their perspective on the Heat's performance against the Pacers, the latest happenings from Miami over the weekend. If you want to know more about Victor Oladipo, David Ramil, and Wes Goldberg are your guys. Let's talk about this game from my perspective. And my first note that I have to say is, to me, this game, this victory by the Pacers over Miami, by far their most impressive win of the season. Like significantly. And they beat the Pistons by 9, and they beat a good perspective. People thought good Nets team. They're not actually good. And a Wizards team that's top 10 in defense. Like, those are wins. Miami, even without Jimmy Butler, is probably the best team they've beaten. But the reason it's the most impressive Pacers win to me has little to do with the quality of competition or the result. They only won by 2. It's the way they won. They won because they played great defense, right? They not great. They played better defense, right? They held the Heat under 100 points. They forced 19 turnovers, right? They made it tough for the Heat to score, right? Their defense was really solid. 99 points allowed in the NBA these days is very impressive. And 2, the Pacers won a game without needing awesome shooting, right? 38% against Detroit is still above average. It's not an amazing shooting game, but it's still above average. And against the Wizards and the Nets, over 50% in both of those games from 3, which you'll win a lot if you make half your threes. So their wins so far have been like, they generated good threes. They deserve credit for winning those games, but also they shot like just fantastic. Against the Heat, they just won going 12 for 39 from 3. They did not need the 3 ball to win. They got some timely threes. We'll talk about that, but they got good enough shots in the paint and at the rim. They got enough free throws. They did well enough winning the possession battle, right? Tied in turnovers, more rebounds to get this win. They clawed a way around, but really inside the arc is what made the difference, right? They made 5 more 2-pointers than the Heat, which can help make up for a discrepancy in other places. So I was impressed with the process of this Pacers win because it was a scrappy, no hot night kind of win. They had to win it with defense. So let's talk about some impressive players before we go game story in general, because again, impressive win. So first, Buddy Hield. Excellent first half, 22 points in the first half of this game. His last 5 games, 6 games, I can't remember, have been awesome offensive performances. And the Heat just started chasing him around the second half, making it hard for him. And he only hit 1 3 in the second half to finish with 25, but it was a huge 3 in the fourth quarter of this game. He played over 40 minutes for the Pacers in this game. So not only was his game impressive because he shot the ball well, especially in the first half, they needed him to play small forward after Duarte got hurt, and he was up for the task. Really good Buddy Hield game. I think he deserved to be highlighted, and we'll go through two other guards who played well. Obviously, Tyrese Haliburton continues, outside of Monday's dud in Brooklyn, and basically every game of the season, he's been awesome. 1 rebound and 1 assist shy of a triple-double. 22, 9, and 9 for Haliburton. He was the Pacers' only offense, it felt like, in the third quarter. Could shoot it over everybody. His general offense, just most of the time, is very good. And then Benedict Mathurin, who's just a shining force all the time he's out there. 12 free throw attempts. He had over half of the Pacers' free throw attempts in this game alone. So even though he was 5 for 11 from the field, he had 23 points, 3 for 7 from deep. And I actually laughed because at practice on Sunday, Haliburton was talking about something that happened with Mathurin in the preseason where, they were doing their scrimmages or their team scrimmages, and they have hired local refs for these. And Mathurin would complain for calls. And apparently Haliburton told Mathurin in these scrimmages, man, you're a rookie, you're not going to get these calls. But Benedict Mathurin's getting these calls because he's forcing refs to call them by being a relentless rim attacker and a fantastic player. So those 3 guards were the main reason the Pacers were able to be buoyed and effective in this game, but especially offensively. But Andrew Nembhard was maybe the Pacers' best player in this game. He had their best plus minus at plus 13. We'll talk about him in the entire third segment, so I won't go too long on him. But Miles Turner was also really good on both ends in this game. He finished with 16 and 7 with 3 blocks and did 6 for 7 inside the arc. He was doing his damage on Bam Adebayo, by the way, a really good defender inside the arc. Very impressive Miles Turner game, and a needed bounce back for him after his weekend was mostly about not basketball and instead a podcast appearance followed by a dud of a game. By the way, I asked him about how he felt about the reaction to that podcast. If you want to read it, si.com/NBA/Pacers. So impressive Turner game. Nembhard stepped up in key moments. We'll get into that. McConnell was good in burst. Jackson had a huge block sequence, and O'Shea's defense was really good. So really impressive game from a lot of guys. Let's just run through some notes that are beyond player performances. Although, again, I think that a lot of players were key in the Pacers having what I would consider to be their most impressive performance of the season. Not their best, their most impressive. I think their best performance is going to be that Brooklyn win for a while. So in the first quarter, after Duarte gets hurt, I was wondering how they would pivot. I figured we would just see some more two big stuff for more Brissett or more Taylor, and we saw Brissett for over 12 minutes in this game, which isn't a lot, but for him, exactly 12 minutes in this game, which isn't a lot in general, but for him has been this season. But at first, McConnell, Hield, Haliburton, and Mathurin at the same time. That's something. That's interesting. So I wanted to run the stats on that. So any 3 of Haliburton, Hield, and Mathurin plus 1 other point guard, McConnell or Nembhard, so far this season. So that's 2 point guards with 1 being Haliburton, as well as Hield and Mathurin at your 3 and 4. Basically, that lineup is Hield and Mathurin at the 3 and 4. 21 minutes for the Pacers this season. They're plus 11, 55 points on 48 possessions, a 114.6 offensive rating, and playing good defense. They had a really good stretch with Terry Taylor at center against the Spurs. They've had good minutes with a bunch of a variety of other bigs as well. Miles Turner was the best one. Sorry, I was reading a bunch of lineups at the same time. Miles Turner was the best one in this game, specifically against the Heat, but they've gotten a ton of Isaiah Jackson minutes early in the season as well. Those groups have been good, and something that the Pacers probably will need to explore with Duarte on the shelf. And then later in the game, they turned to the 3-point guard group. Shout out to Wilson Moore of the Indy Star, who no longer will be on the Pacers beat. They have hired Dustin Doprak. If you follow IU Sports, you know who that is. Go follow him because there's a new Pacers person on the block for you all. But they went with the 3-point guard group. McConnell, Nembhard, and Haliburton all at the same time, right? 5 minutes. They only allowed 11 points on 12 possessions. So the defense was good. The offense was atrocious. That group could not score at all. But that's the kind of stuff I think you're going to see the Pacers exploring more as they have to navigate these Duarte-less and potentially Nesmith-less waters for a little bit. So let's talk about the second half of this game, because the Pacers' first half was great. They actually had a good first quarter, which for them has been so rare this season. Only down by 1. They were up 12 at halftime after scoring 34 in the second quarter. And then the Heat came out in the second half and ran these weird defenses that tried to shrink the court and make it impossible to drive. As the Pacers have described it, the Heat's defense isn't about stopping you as much as it's about slowing you down, making you think about what they're doing, and by the time you figured out what they're doing and they've gunked you up, there's only a couple seconds left on the shot clock, and you just got to do something, right? It's like it takes you out of your rhythm and pace in a way that's really tricky, and you have to keep playing your game and keep attacking, and it's hard to do because of the way they defend. So the Heat's second half defense was really good, and the reason this game almost wasn't an impressive win for the Pacers. Only 39 second half points for the Pacers. They got just enough buckets to get this one done. But as the Heat are gucking it up, right, Gabe Vincent hits a three. It's 94-94. The Pacers had slowly tried to hold them off the whole half, but at that point, there was about 5.5 minutes to go. I thought when the Heat tied it, the Pacers were dead. They had held them off. They had their spirits because they were ahead, but once it was tied, I thought it was done for. And things were, basically in the whole second half, Halliburton could shoot it, and Turner was doing a little bit on the inside and on defense, but nobody could do as much as they could in the first half, and nobody was doing well. And then, 94-94, the Pacers' defense, of all things, this team that has been atrocious on that end of the floor all season, just locks up the Heat. The Heat could not score. From 5 minutes and 35 seconds to go till a minute 20, the Heat had 0 points. Over 4 minutes of crunch time, Pacers gave up no points. And all the Heat points for the rest of the game, the entire game, were at the foul line, right? So the Heat did not hit a shot for the last 5.5 minutes of this game. Pacers did a ton of good defense stuff, and then they got just enough from Buddy Buckets, who finally hit a three. Mathurin hits a free throw. They just found Nembhard hit a shot as well. They found just enough points to squeak this one out, because it did not look like they were going to have it, right? The Pacers hit 94 with 6:44 to go, and then they did not score again until 3:22 to go, and Hield hit that huge three. He finally got free, and then Halliburton layup and a Mathurin free throw ended up putting the game away. But, their offense looked a little slow, but the Heat looked even slower because the Pacers played great defense to close, and yet the Heat have a shot to win it. 7 seconds to go. They have the ball. They go to Tyler Hero. And Rick Carlisle says, you know what? Andrew Nembhard, you've played great defense tonight. You're the rookie. You're guarding Tyler Hero. And they stick with the rookie on him. And he's probably their best perimeter defensive option at this time. I will talk about that again in the third segment. But thinking through their options, maybe it's Mathurin, maybe it's Nembhard, maybe it's O'Shea Brissett, But they went to Andrew Nembhard, and he did a really good job. He shades Hero the opposite way he likes to go. 2 nights ago, Wednesday night, so 5 nights ago from now, but 2 nights before that game, Tyler Hero hit a game winner against the Sacramento Kings going to his left, from the left slot, basically. Nembhard forces him right. The three is short. Pacers win 99-101. Really impressive win to me because of how they did it. They survived the Heat gimmicks. They responded just enough down the stretch, and they get a win. So really, that's something the Pacers can build off of, right? It's not just they shot really well or their offensive process rolled through. They found a way to win against a good team. That's something that, good-ish teams do. I don't think the Pacers are a good-ish team, but they were on Friday night. And they have a tough week coming up. Zion and the Pelicans look great. The former MVP is in town, and the Raptors have kicked the Pacers' butt the last couple seasons. But we'll see how they respond, because they did play a good game against Miami. Without Duarte, though, it will be tough. Let's talk about Andrew Nembhard, who had a fantastic game. I wrote a little story about his performance on SI. He played so well against Miami that I just want to talk about it. So let's close this talking about why Andrew Nembhard was the hero for the Pacers against the Heat. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, go check out Locked On Sports Today to hear the latest around the sporting news from the Locked On Podcast Network. Our local experts are everywhere. If there's a big story in the sports world, Locked On Sports Today will have it for you quickly and digestibly. It's perfect. It is awesome. You got to check it out. Peter Bukowski doing a great job there. Let's finish Locked On Pacers today talking about Andrew Nembhard, the 31st overall pick, who has been talked about by Kevin Pritchard now as a first-round talent, and by Rick Carlisle. And this game showed why. This is one of the best single-digit all-stats games I've ever seen. So I show up to this game. The Drake album came out this day. The new Drake album came out this day, which is relevant because before the game in the locker room, I'm working on something about TJ McConnell. I'm asking Andrew Nembhard about TJ McConnell, and the conversation drifts off to me talking to Andrew Nembhard about Drake, right? So before this basketball game starts, I'm talking to Andrew Nembhard, not at all about his own game or about how he's played this year. I'm talking about a different player on the team and rap, and not about basketball at all. And after the game, the only things I was asking Andrew Nembhard about are basketball and defense and being clutch against a good NBA team and carving up his own. He just had a fantastic game, which is crazy because you look back at the end of this game. If you pulled up just the box score, 4 points, 3 rebounds, 6 assists. And you would not think that player was a big difference maker. Led the team in plus-minus at plus 13. Defense was fantastic all night. And the way he was helping wasn't even necessarily just about his passing to the guy who scored. He was living in the middle of the Heat zone, which leads to a lot of hockey assists, right? They have to bend it to him. He throws it to the corner. They cut to that guy. Now someone else is wide open, right? He doesn't get a stat for that. He does get a lot of impact for that. So he was awesome. Andrew Nembhard is showing why the Pacers are so high on him. And this is the kind of game that you like to see if you're the Pacers, because it wasn't that he played well. It's that he did a lot of stuff that is not like the point guardy stuff that he was talked about, right? Like he can pass in traffic and kind of score a little bit. Like he did all those stuff really well. He played multiple positions. He played 1, 2, and 3 in this game. 1, 2, and 3. And in the second quarter, the Pacers go on this big run, right? They're down 1 after the first quarter. They're right in it, in the middle of the second. And Nembhard comes in and was fantastic, right? Diamond transition to Buddy Hield. One of the slickest passes of the game as he cuts into the lane and kind of spins and pirouettes and fires it to TJ McConnell on a cut when he jumped. And perfect layup for McConnell. 3 of his 4 first half assists, open Pacer layups. The other one was a 3, right? Great passing in the second quarter run, and the Pacers get ahead. He's plus 17 at halftime. Oh, that McConnell pass. If you haven't seen it, you absolutely have to. And all night, he defends very well, right? I think his matchup shot 4 for 14 off the top of my head. I will check my own story because, again, I had so many tabs open, I closed the wrong one earlier in this podcast. But the defense was awesome, right? He was absolutely everywhere on that end of the floor. Yes, 4 for 14, 1 for 6 on 2-pointers the Heat were, with Nembhard as the closest defender in this game. And so Halliburton's talking about him after the game. Halliburton says, he was awesome. Okay, yeah, normal thing I'd expect. Then he said, one of the best on-ball defenders on the team. And I'd never thought about it, but I think that's true. And he said he's actually one of our best on-ball defenders. I mean, it's pretty easy to make that argument because at 6'5", he can defend a couple positions, and he's done a good job staying in front of those guys. Like he talked about at practice on Sunday, like he knew he wanted to shade Hero, so he goes the opposite way he normally does, right? He wanted to make sure he was ready if a screen came. One never did, right? All this stuff you have to think about in a 7-second possession. It's going so fast. You're on the court. You're a rookie. You're defending a guy with 29 points with a game winner the other night, and no problem. Calm, composed, cool, collected, shuts down Tyler Hero for that shot, right? The perimeter defense was there all night. Like, that was also really impressive. And then the other stuff, that I already talked about this, the way he lived in the Heat zone in the fourth quarter, even the third quarter, was fantastic, right? The Heat were doing some 2-3 zone stuff, some 1-2-1 at times, or 1-2-1-2, and Nembhard would cut into the middle and then flick it out to the corner right away. Like, he could figure out which side they were going to be rushing him from, or he'd look for the shot at the right time, or this really funky lob he had to Isaiah Jackson at one possession. Like, the way he was able to read quickly with guys around him where to shoot the ball kept the Pacers offense moving. And they were getting gunked. They were getting gunked up by that Heat defense. They needed someone to change that, and it was Andrew Nembhard, right? He found the right passes. He found the kickouts. He was really brilliant in the second half. He had a couple ugly turnovers with about 5 minutes to go, forced it a little bit, but he earned the right to force it because he was really good from like the middle of the third to late fourth. And oh, by the way, outside of all that stuff he already did, from 8 minutes and 22 seconds, from 8 minutes and 47 seconds in the fourth quarter to the 3:22 mark in the fourth quarter, he had every single Pacer point. Like, it gets unsung because Mather hit a clutch free throw and Buddy Hield hit a big 3, and Nembhard made this crazy stop at the end of the game. For 5.5 minutes, basically, in the fourth quarter of this game, Andrew Nembhard scored every single Pacer point, right? Like, he stepped up when it mattered, and they won because he was clutch, and he stepped up in multiple ways, and he did it on both ends of the floor. And oh, by the way, 41 ball touches, 1 turnover. 1 turnover for Andrew Nembhard in this game. Everything he needed to do was asked to do. Hey, Andrew, our starting 3 is hurt. Our backup 3 is hurt. We're going to go with a bajillion guard lineups, and you're going to be one of them. We need you to defend Tyler Hero, and we need you to create shots for other people and run the show occasionally as the point guard and fit in with a bunch of lineups that have barely played together this season. And he said, okay, I can do that. And he did it. And that is the kind of stuff that I think he can be that perfect utility player for the Pacers, right? That is sort of what it feels like he's going to be for this team. That's a really useful piece to have. So this type of player, if this is sustainable, right? And he didn't even shoot that well in this game. If this sort of impact level is sustainable, he's the kind of guy that's worthy of shaking up the rotation a bit. And that sounds dumb to say because, again, he's played in every game since the season opener, right? Over 10 minutes, 6 times this season. 5 times this season, right? Like, they're clearly trying to get him in there. But in this game specifically, he plays almost 30 minutes. It's like they're going to have to try to get him out there. And I think with Duarte out, it's kind of easy. But I think he is the guy you explore playing over some of your other guys who you might have thought about before the season should clearly be ahead of him. Now, I'm not saying I would do this for sure, but Terry Taylor, Goga Bitadze, O'Shea Brissett, guys who are kind of on the fringe of the rotation, Nembhard's in that mix to steal that minutes. You got to think about moving guys around to get him in. I don't know what I would do necessarily on a game-by-game basis. Carlisle has said several times, whether it's Terry Taylor starting early in the season or James Johnson in Brooklyn or changing the starting five, matchups have sometimes dictated the way he sets his rotation on a given game. So I don't know how they will decide when to play Nembhard and what lineups and how he'll be the most important. But as an answer on the wing, without Duarte, without Nesmith, and when they're needing to change things up to stay afloat, he's going to be an answer. He's going to be a guy who plays a lot. And as he continues to grow and find his niche on this Pacers team, he's going to be a key piece. And I think this Heat game showed why a guy with 6 points, 3 rebounds, and 4 assists, 4 points, 3 rebounds, 6 assists. I flipped the points and assists there. Can be so important for the Pacers. So credit to Andrew Nembhard. He played fantastic. Got a story up on him if you would like to read it, as well as the Duarte injury. And Rick Carlisle. Congrats to Rick Carlisle, moving up to 14th on the all-time wins list past Jack Ramsey, former Pacers coach. May he rest in peace. Really fun Pacer weekend outside of the Duarte injury because they got that win. And, of course, we'll be here all week covering their games against New Orleans on Monday, Denver on Wednesday, and Toronto on Saturday. Hope you guys had a great weekend. Thank you for listening. You can follow the show on Twitter at LockedOnPacers and me at TEastNBA. We are free and available everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube, where you can see my face as I explain all of these Pacers-related stories to you. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great rest of your day. We will see you tomorrow.